just for a moment, to become the explorer, the adventurer, the inner journey that you're always navigating. And when you arrive, it's time to go further. And so just to sit comfortably wherever you feel you're at in this moment of time. Rested. Accepting. Feeling well with yourself. Resting for what has been accomplished. And strengthened too for the next part of your unique journey. And so only the one thought. I am peace. Thank you. I suppose that's where the journey begins, and that's where the journey ends, in silence. And maybe part of what we have to practice is bringing more silence into activity and interaction. To start it with silence, to let it flow with silence, and then once again, to return. And so there's no squandering of energy, no wastage. And it's like everything has been put in its rightful place in that moment. That you don't need to keep looking over your shoulder, looking at events of the past. But it's as if you're the wonderful accountant who instantly reconciles, income and outcome. So this topic of, the flyer that I saw, it has so many things in it. It's almost like a lecture or a roadmap by itself. And so I'm thinking, where do I focus here? Because what I was seeing were the words like free, change, transform, love, compassion, and to fly, and all, I suppose, connected with what is suggested as the first aspect of that is to love the self. Oh, there's a topic. So I was thinking about flying, and I'm sure you all know some pilots. I remember that some of you even work at the airport. But if you're learning to fly, you know, what are some of the requirements? Well, first,
Why is Lujota speaking?
the first is the very clear objective that this is an urge, this is something you want to do. And so whether it's for just your own motivation or because you see it as a career path. But I don't doubt that along with some degree of courage, because you could hobble yourself by thinking of all the things that could possibly go wrong. So courage might be something that's needed. And of course, within that courage, kind of an excitement about it. Certainly today, you need material resources in that the lessons are not free. And so that willingness to give something, to exchange something for what you're going to receive. And of course, the trust that you have a well-seasoned, experienced pilot who's going to be guiding you and teaching you. And I'm sure when you first get in the cockpit, the instrument panel is daunting. But again, as you have a good guide, then after some time, it becomes easy. And you master not just the in-flight, but the taking off and the landing and all of the other various components. And I suppose you could say, rather than, you know, loving the self, it's about learning to love the self. I don't think we come in automatically loving the self. And I wonder sometimes, when did that phrase first come into popular usage? I tend to think that it probably wasn't there generations ago. Of course, everything was different then. And so it is, on the one hand, a process. And it's not that you have to wait till you are 100% loving yourself in order to reap the benefits, in order to see the metamorphosis, if you like. And the secret, which probably all of you know, is that you are returning to where you started from. And so the conclusion at one level is an inevitability. And I think that's true for all human souls. But you can hasten the process. You can have a degree of awareness about where you want to go, how you should be, what you want to be, even if it's just a slightly better version of yourself. And then knowing that if I do this, it will take me in that direction. If I don't do this, then it will slow down the process. So, you know, when we think of love, you know, what kind of love do you want? Are there different kinds of love? What does it mean to love the self? You know, it's hard enough to love people that we think we know. And can I say that I know myself sufficiently? What is it that I'm loving? Which self is it? Are there different selves? And once again, I'm sure all of us will say, no, there's one self. Maybe you could say there's variety aspects to that self. And so what is the self that continues this dialogue in your head, this unceasing talk show with yourself that critiques every single thing that you do and think and say, and what's done to you and what's not done to you? So there's this whole aspect of the self that seems to be the watcher, that is assessing, but it's not necessarily and always coming to the right conclusions. Because I think if it's about loving myself, then what am I going to get from that? Is that sufficient unto itself? Or is the prize, at least, you know, in the immediate sense, well-being, a sense of well-being, maybe even happiness, you know? So at some level, it is about changing the dialogue. And as we started with exploration and the reward of discovery, or those aha moments, I think at one level, there's nothing more satisfying than that. And it's not being like a narcissist. On the contrary, because in the exploration, what you will find is where there has been an imbalance in the giving and the taking, and you discover resources within your own self that you didn't know you had. And so that of itself is maybe good enough reason. And I would imagine everyone who's on here today has begun that journey. And how would you define, you know, even though you may indicate or feel that you're lacking in self-love, self-worth, self-value, yet I don't doubt that you will also say that you love very deeply, that you can love other people. And whether it's family or friends, or maybe even God, you have a sense that you have a great capacity to love. And is it humility that makes me say, well, I don't have as much love for my own self? I don't think so. It's kind of an inverted humility. But you know, when we look at the different kinds of love, as I say, what we might have thought of as romantic love, and that can be mistaken or where it becomes an obsessive, a compulsive, where you think that you're, putting this person ahead of your own self, but it's maybe just a little bit of a fantasy, and it's really spurred by something that's lacking in one's own self. And it's almost like where you're idolizing someone and attributing characteristics to them which they may not necessarily have, but you've become maybe a little bit compulsive. And of course, we all know about the projection onto someone else of that which may be lacking in my own self. And then, is the love that I'm seeking, is it, that unconditional love, which is often attributed to a parent and a child? And that's interesting. And I suppose at one level, because the mother in particular that has given birth to the child, and I see this in all of nature, that you are dedicated to the sustenance of that which you have created. Time isn't taken into account. Facilities aren't taken into account. That everything, that you're not getting anything back in a sense. It would seem you're not getting anything back. But once again, that may be showing you that your capacity to love utterly, and not expecting a return, is more than what you thought it was. So then, of course, we have brotherly love, the love of friendship, all of these things. Have you ever tried describing what you think self-love might look like? Who would you be differently if there was that love for the self? And of course, in that same way that I watch, there's a pair of eagles not too far from here, and they have 2 babies. The babies were born in Christmas week. And, watching them grow, and they will stay in the nest for about 4 months before they fledge. And the mother and father, who mate for life, tend to them. They go off, they dive, they get the fish or the whatever it is, and they bring it back to the nest. And of course, it wouldn't be a conscious thought with the chicks, but they expect that the parents, the presence, as soon as the presence of the parents, then they're in anticipation of being fed and protected, like from the elements and everything else. And I sometimes feel that, so in other words, you could say, and this is, putting a human characteristic on an animal or a bird, that they absolutely trust the process, that they absolutely trust that this is what's supposed to happen. When either of these 2 massive winged creatures come onto the nest, then they're going to be fed. They're going to be provided for. And we know now, in terms of we could all be given degrees in psychology, simply because of having lived life. And so we often know that what went wrong in the process might be a throwback to our childhood, and that something may have gone wrong there. And that trust that we should have had, or that we did have, was perhaps betrayed by a parent figure. And so there's this feeling sometimes that because we didn't get what all living things should get, in a sense, from the outset, this image just of a little tree growing crooked, you know, that it didn't grow straight as it was meant to, but that it grew nonetheless, but at an awkward angle. And so part of this journey in relation to meditation assures me that I do have a resource inside my own self that can water, that can nourish, that can nurture and change the way that the tree is growing, rather than just accepting. You know, I once had someone whose first language wasn't English, and she was trying to explain to me about the huge health challenge that she had, and she walked with a walking stick and so on. And the word that she used, the English word that she used, I thought was very interesting. She said, "I'm an invalid." She meant she was an invalid, but the word is the same. And so that what has validated you in your journey, and what, including your society, has invalidated you. And that may even continue at the present time. And you sometimes have to look not only at that, your own voice in your head, but the other voices in your head. And not only the voices, but sometimes you've actually given someone a very big seat in your head. And you allow that person to call the shots. You're always feeling that you're trying to live up to their either expectations or criticism, that you're beholden. To whom are you beholden? And in a kind of a way, it's holding you back and it's holding you down. And it may be that the other person is, you know, not the good guy. And as someone said recently, if you're being held down, then that person has to be down there with you to hold you down. And yet you're giving them a place in your head, in your mind, allowing them to validate or invalidate you. And so it's just something to be a little bit careful of. I was thinking how, you know, for each of us, we have our own uniqueness, and to the same extent, there's hardly a degree or half a degree that distinguishes one from the other. You know, the game might look different in terms of the details, but in terms of the big picture, it's the same. And so, as well as trying to get back to peace and to love, there'll be the same challenges for each of us, even though they may look different. So I was thinking that we all come, we're kind of like a, you know, if you can imagine that you have, or you are a little plot of land, tiny little corner, and you haven't tended to it very well. And such that you allowed everybody else to dump their stuff in there. And so that a lot of maybe, if not garbage, but weeds have accumulated. And me, in my ignorance, might even have thought that the weeds were flowers. And maybe there is one little corner in which there are flowers and there is a fragrance. And so, in terms of, again, meditation, one of the titles that we would use for God, and certainly, you know, is something that's remembered in Islam, the idea of the garden of Allah. I am that garden of Allah. Each one of us is. And so it's not that God is going to come and, you know, wave a magic wand and say, you know, everything's clean now, and there will only be flowers and vegetables growing there. But as I discern through meditation again and the silence, what it is that I have allowed to come into this space, and what's mine and what's not mine, and to be able to release it. Because within me, I have, you know, not just my own personal history, but the history of my people, of my race, of my culture. And I was remembering there was a musical, and it was quite ahead of its time for the 50s in the US. I think it was called South Pacific. And there was a song in that which said how children have to be taught, have to be carefully taught to hate and to fear, and it's drummed into their sweet little ear. And that, you know, even as a little child, whoever is deemed your parents' enemies automatically become your enemies. And so, who am I and who is my, this is back to the self again. And you will espouse these same attitudes and hatreds or self-loathing, thinking it's the truth, thinking it's the truth of you. And it's absolutely not. Because you know, in any of those scenarios, there is no happiness. There is no growth. There is no well-being. And so then who's going to re-educate me? I sometimes think of it as, I like this word, intuition, that I am now spiritually in tuition. I am teaching myself from the inside out, and not on the basis of history or events or family or any of those things. I'm not saying it doesn't count, but I will be bringing a different energy to it. And it's like that garden, you know, again, to begin with, I can maybe remove some of the extraneous stuff that's in there, but that the garden, even if it's been growing weeds or whatever else, then you have to know that it has a source along with the earth or the clay that has allowed those to grow. And so, as well as seeds, there has to be water down there somewhere. Now, what I'm suggesting is that the real nature of the soul is to love. And in the absence of that quality, then I have to try and get it from somewhere else. You know, in other words, that I need an identity that will draw attention, that will draw, you know, something to myself. And so I manufacture something, you know, I manufacture an identity. I'm the smartest, I'm the prettiest, I'm the wealthiest, whatever, you know, I'm the best kid. My mom loves me more than she loves you. And so that you draw this, but it's not real either. It's something that replaces true love, because for my happiness, it can never be dependent on something that's external to myself or something that can leave in a heartbeat. You loved me the most yesterday, now you love somebody else. And where am I? You know, and so that there's, I think of this like the clean water. There's like clean water from which I can drink. And then there's the sullied water. I still need to drink. I can't manage without water. But let it not be that I accept something second rate, mediocre, or that's polluted, that has something else in it that's maybe just self-serving, that is not genuine. And so we all know when it comes to self-love, then I have to look in this direction again. I have to go inside myself. It's almost like, you know how it is when you have seen people with what they call a divining rod. You know what a divining rod is? That they hold that stick with a kind of a fork on it. And when it starts to move of its own accord, you know that there's a water source down there, that there's water. You can't see it from where you are, but it's there nonetheless, and it's flowing and it's clean. And so I could say that it's the same for ourselves. Now, accessing that does require the practice, I think, of meditation. That psychologically, everything I'm saying, you know, but that of itself does not give me the power to access that thing within my own self. And so, you know, with what I would call another kind of love is divine love. It's not of this dimension, but it manifests on this dimension. And the thing about divine love is that in that you are drawing from source. And if you take something from the source, you don't have to replenish it. Whereas if you're taking it from a human being or your status in the world or whatever else, you have to give something back. And ultimately, that little pond or puddle or whatever will become empty. But draw it from the source so that you don't have to refill it or replenish it. It comes with no strings attached, which is usually the case with a lot of human love. And you see, you know, sometimes it hurts the heart sometimes when you see how maybe a young person has taken their own life because they didn't get good grades. In fact, I was just seeing a case of that. I think it was in England. And the thing is, the young woman got the result that she hadn't passed the exam. She wouldn't be able to go on to her third year. And she took her own life. And then they discovered that they had sent her the wrong information. They hadn't totaled it with something that she had done before, and she had in fact passed. And so that thing of you know, and that could have been just one's own self, or again, the parents putting these expectations on you. We'll love you if you are valuable, if, or you're valued when you do this or you do that. And so it's this thing of going into your own cocoon. But have enough discernment to know that the people that you're around, because what you're doing is looking in mirrors. And sometimes the mirrors are ugly, or they're not giving you the whole picture of yourself. And so be in a place or in a space where you know that they lean towards goodness, they lean towards, you know, inclusivity and kindness, and being able to trust that. And so then in this journey, then I could say the divine or the source becomes the gardener, you know, the chief gardener, in allowing me to discern between good seed and bad seed, teaching me about the elements, about the value of water, of the sun, when not to touch and when to be fully engaged. And so that the outcome, of course, is a crop of what it is you want to have in your garden. And so I'm not sure that there is another way. I'm not sure that there's an easier way. And so the process of loving yourself, and for me, it's more about, am I comfortable with myself? Get comfortable with yourself. And even more than the loving bit, do I like myself? And often what happens to you in relationships, you know, these so-called passionate, romantic, or they could be anything, that at some point you realize that not only is that person treating you badly or wrongly, that's unimportant, and it could be in your estimation, but you find you no longer like yourself. It's not even that you no longer like that person, but you don't like yourself. And so sometimes that is sufficient to start you on another journey. It's like, you know, you have a little sensation in your mouth, and it's like, okay, I can manage, and you keep motoring on, and then there's like an intense toothache or whatever. You don't sit with that anymore. You go looking for the dentist. So in the same way, sometimes these little things happen in our life because by and large, the universe is kindly disposed towards us if we adhere to or even listen for the signals and the direction it might be pointing us in. And perhaps, it's my own experience at the moment, I really feel that there's a particular energy that is available to us today more so than ever before. And it is on a subtle level. You're not necessarily going to see all the people who are meditating, who are aspiring towards a better world. You may still only see the garbage, not the flowers. And they're aspiring to a better world, and they're putting in the time and the energy, and not so much even in terms of the way it manifests through actions and interactions, but it is a very personal thing, and it's to do with your thoughts. And so that shift in the thoughts means a shift in vibrations. And vibrations, although most acutely felt, you know, when they're closest to the source of whoever's outputting those vibrations, but they don't stop there, they travel. And I think that, you know, the quality of vibrations that are of love and are of peace and are of happiness, that they act as a conduit, even to people who are still half asleep, you know, and it somehow starts to massage something within them. Because what we're saying is, at the end of the day, we are all made of the same stuff. Even if superficially we see difference, we are made of the same stuff. We are the same stuff. We are all eternal souls connected with the source, who has, dare I use the words, a particular interest in our well-being. It's the supreme parent, the ultimate parent, that only wants the happiness of the children and is providing the means, is teaching, is educating us so that we are complicit in our own unfoldment, if you like, and that where we begin to match at one level, dare I say, the divine, but I begin to match my own image of myself. I have vacated that seat of invalidation. And of course, as I do that, my enemies decrease. I don't see with the vision of enemies. Everybody else is stuck in their part as well, but it's not going to serve anything by my just complaining about them. I have to keep moving. You stay stuck in your limitations, the narrowness of your vision, your perception. But as I keep moving, then it's like that energy. I know that at some point it will be the time for you to it will be the time for the other one. And that gradually this increase, you know, Gail said something at the beginning about a combination of heart and head. And I was thinking about it in terms of, you know, the different elements and how sometimes astrologically, you know, this is a fire sign, this is an earth sign, this is an air sign, this is a water sign. So all these elements, and I have to be, in a sense, all of them. And so it's the heart, it's the head, the earthiness, the feet, so that energy, you know, that energy of the divine, you know, permeates. And so when it's time to be passionate, or rather compassionate, that is available to me, not least for my own self. And so, you know, to know that you have that resource. Someone just recently who started the teachings of the Brahma Kumaris, and is maybe only about 2 or 3 weeks in, but yet, without a doubt, that soul has been on the journey for a long time, you know, checking out other paths and ways of doing this. And she said something that I felt was extremely interesting, that one of the differences that she found when she came to the Brahma Kumaris was that for her, in practical terms, in just those couple of weeks, it was no longer about a process, but that she changed instantly. In other words, I'm not saying it's going to be the same for everyone, but just like the gardener will teach you about timing. And there is a time when you don't even know how much work you've done. And so sometimes referred to as the tipping point. So it is no longer a process to let go of this other rubbish, to separate yourself from a relationship that was no longer serving either one of you, but that it's like, it's not about breaking your head even with a choice. It just becomes crystal clear. And it's in this way, step by step, that our confidence in our own self evolves, develops, and where we feel that we really do have something to contribute. It may not be what society would appear to value, you know, status and wealth and so on and so forth. But I, as an individual, however small I am, I have something to contribute. And that is myself. And so in this way, you know, we're no longer, as I say, resisting things, protecting ourselves. But in a strange kind of a way, even though you're no longer looking for things from other people, you become irresistible. It's like people want to be in your energy because they feel good about themselves. And so in this way, we are friends with each and every one. So maybe we have a little meditation. Let's just draw into myself again. The ears have heard enough. The eyes have seen enough. Now I change the lens and the focus. And it's my inner world. It bypasses all that's superfluous, the chattering mind, the criticizing intellect, and takes me to that hidden valley. Almost as if patiently waiting for my return. The space is fragrant with silence. And it draws me to itself as if with a warm embrace. I'm home. And the memory of pure love, of acceptance, of belonging, flood my whole being. This is who I am. I am light. I am might. And I am love. And I sink into this cloud.